What do you get when you combine trade compliance with internal training and system support implementation challenges? You get my trade compliance talk with Emil Svedung. We talked about the importance of having internal training as an integral part of your internal compliance program. And we also talked about implementing system support in your business and all the challenges from gathering the resources needed to implement that system support, but also to secure the finances from the top management. So get your coffee. I got mine ready, and sit down and tune in to this trade compliance talk with Emil Svedung. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Trade Compliance Podcast's Trade Compliance Talks. This time, I am having a conversation with Emil Svedung. So, hi, Emil. I'm very pleased to have you on, and could you please give us a brief introduction of who you are?
Yes, hi. My name is Emil Svedung, Swede, as you Anders. I live in the southern part of Sweden. 46 years old, father of three girls in their teens with all those challenges, married. I'm an engineer, Master of Science, Engineering Physics base, and have been working with trade compliance for about 10 years within aerospace, mostly, and the last 2 years, space exclusively. Yeah, I find this very fun. Thank you for having me on the show. It would be great, I hope.
Yes, of course.
This talk will be focusing on training and system support for trade compliance, and also a little bit on intangible transfers. That's at least my focus for today.
That sounds great. A lot of fun and a ton of value. But please, could you start off with how did you end up in trade compliance?
Yes, as we said in talking before, it's in Sweden, we talk about living on a banana shell. That's basically it. As I said, I'm an engineer at base, starting out as a young graduate at Volvo Aero Corporation back in 2003. So young graduate program, design engineer within the space industries, starting out developing space engine nozzles, nozzle extensions and turbines and stuff like that. For some reasons, some manager thought that I would be a good quality manager. So I ended up doing quality for the space programs at that company. And then another manager told me there's something called export controls, and would you be interested in doing that? 25%. And I said, yes, I took a training on that. It sounded interesting. And I'm a curious guy base. So I said, yes. And it turned out I would be the export control officer for the military programs, space programs, and the overhaul programs of civil aircraft engines. And yeah, basically it wasn't 25%, it was 150% full time. And I have to this shows if I would go for the trade compliance route or continue with quality management. And the trade compliance was more fun, more challenging, and basically I've never looked. So thank you for that banana shell.
Yes, it's always interesting to hear how you end up in trade compliance. I always say that I had a career plan and it really took a left turn, and here I am.
Yeah.
So you never know what to expect, but somehow ending up in trade compliance isn't that bad.
Definitely. Very funny and always something new to learn.
Yes, it's the same topic, it's the same regulations, but never 2 days in a row that looks like each other.
Exactly.
So, moving on to today's topic, could you give a brief overview of what internal training sessions and everything around that means for you?
So basically, I think internal training, working in a public company, internal training for awareness of trade compliance is the best and most efficient risk reduction for any company. Having the people aware of regulations, that it is something called export controls and sanctions, cannot do business with everyone, cannot send everything to everyone. Basically, I think that's the key, having the awareness of your employees. So that said, I also think it's very good to have functional training. So specific training for certain functions of the company. I specifically, as an engineer, I think the training for engineers is extremely important, because engineers are curious and innovative, so they find ways around things. So if you cannot do like this, an engineer always finds a way around it. So engineering, I think, is good training, but of course, sales is the first part really in trade compliance, to make sure your sales team is aware that they cannot sell things to everyone. And also procurement is another key function that needs training. And of course, program managers, your managers who are hiring, and also HR, I think, is key. So human resources persons, making sure employing right personnel. So working in the EU, as many of us working in the trade compliance are aware of the ITAR, the importance of nationalities, and the requirement to license certain nationalities and stuff like that. And it's something that generally you don't think so much about, but it's extremely important, and to manage in the right way. So 4 key functions, I think, is engineering, sales, procurement, and HR. But of course, you could have functional training for, because any IT environment you set up, trade compliance is extremely important to keep track of. I have not yet performed functional training for IT, but I see the need more and more to make sure that any IT program manager who's setting up a new system or something like that has the awareness to talk to trade compliance at an early stage.
Yeah, of course. That's really important to keep control over your intangibles.
Exactly. That is, I think, the most important and the most challenging is intangible transfers and intangible exports. It is so easy to make an export or a transfer or something, and there's no easy way to manage the license control of that. I've not been able to implement a good and secure way for that for companies. So basically, it's awareness and then training, and try to achieve an easy way for your engineers or anyone who wants to share or send controlled information to an external partner. That is what I at heart feel the most important. But actually, it's been the same since I started out as an engineer. I took an internal first awareness training, and I understood, okay, this is important, and it's really not easy to manage. How the hell, sorry, or how am I supposed to be aware and have control of these licenses and stuff like that? So basically, it should be easy to do the right thing, but basically it is usually, and usually as an engineer, you want to communicate, you want to send, you want to speak to anyone who can help you solve your problem. Less.
Yeah, because put yourself in their situation, they need to do their job, and they have most likely a big pressure to deliver upon their shoulders. But we trade compliance folks need to be there helping them to do the right thing.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they won't be able to do what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. In doing this training, maybe you will come to that, but I have struggled a lot to make sure my audience is attracted to training in some way. So basically that I attract the audience, both that they want to come to my training. That's what one. Either you force someone telling it's mandatory, everyone needs to have it, or you try to do some kind of commercial, but you want to do it. You need to spread the word. This is a good training. And by doing that, you need to perform a good training. And that's not the easiest thing when you have a, by many means, boring subject. At my previous employer, I was handed together with other export control officers the mission to have training for all engineers. And at my company alone, it was about 800 people who were supposed to get it. And we would have to have this functional training on site. So we had it, I think we have 6 sessions with about 100 persons in the audience each time. And before that training, I was just like, and I didn't create the material myself. I got handed this material. This is what they should learn. Basically, I got it from the top. I like the material, but as when trying to explain something in written words regarding trade compliance, it tends to be very long and very much words and very much. So the presentation, I think it was 6 slides, something, and a lot of text. And I was thinking, how can we make this attractive? Basically, I got a tip from my wife, actually said, you're an old singer. Start with a song that caught everyone's attention, at least. Don't fall asleep immediately. That's why I write the export control song, which I started my training with. And it turned out to be a good thing. People remembered that they had the training. That's a very good thing. They didn't remember everything I said, but they remember that export control is a thing. That they
and they remember you.
Exactly. So that was a good thing. And otherwise, I think another very good thing within training is to have some kind of storytelling, to tell a story. This is what happened when we did this. And this turned out like that. It could have turned out like this, but it did that. And basically have a story, tell them something that they can relate to. That is something I think is very good. So for instance, say you had a near miss or even a violation that you had to do, and how did you discover it? What happened? Explain that you didn't punish the guy who made the mistake, but rather we improved the processes, we improved the way of doing stuff so that it couldn't happen again. We did a lot of corrective actions, and also as well, of course, talk about other companies who have made mistakes. That is important, but the more the audience can relate to the story, the better it is. So that I think is key, and I try to implement that in any training, to have a story, even if it's procurement, or to have a specific story for procurement, for sales, for HR, that they can relate to. It makes it much more efficient.
Storytelling is more compelling than a paragraph reading, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in order, as I said, it's a very good thing for risk reduction. But in order for it to be really safe, everyone needs to have some kind of training. And I know most companies who have a good compliance program, they have some kind of mandatory awareness training. We do at our company, we have an e-learning that everyone has to do when they start their employment. And then, as I said, certain functional trainings. I want everyone who, for instance, who is an engineer, I want them to know what are the requirements. At least I want them to have heard it once. So basically, I want everyone working within engineering to have the training. But the challenge, I think, is to be able to get the managers, to get the audience to my sessions, basically. That is a challenge. And to also keep track of who has had the training. When I had my face-to-face trainings, I could have these attendance sheets, everyone could sign and so on. Now, since the pandemic, and now I'm working more and more remotely. The training is within Teams now, and it's a very different kind of challenge as well, to do the training where you're not in front of an audience. Typically, you don't see your audience. And that I think is a very challenging thing, because we're in front of 70 guys who are tired, who don't think this is the most important. You see that in the audience eyes, that they are actually almost falling asleep. And then you can do your your short pause, have them stand up, shake the legs, everything. But in teams, you don't get that. And you tend to keep on with the trade compliance talks. You think it's so important and so exciting, and there's a risk of losing them. But also
Yeah,
the benefit of having
yes,
teams is that you can keep really good track of actually who has attended, who was there, who was on the call, and then you have a good record of that. So that's a big benefit, I think, to have it done remotely.
it has its drawbacks, but benefits too, of course. But I think that the biggest drawback is you never know what the other person is doing other than watching you,
Exactly.
because they might be doing something entirely different than what you think they're doing. They might be out mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know.
No. Multitasking is very good. I got learned sometime that in any meeting you're if you're invited to a meeting, you should be clear to the other participants that I am multitasking. Basically, I have a lot to do. I will be multitasking during this meeting.
Mhm.
But trade compliance trainings, I would expect 80% multitasking. But of course, I say that starting the training, please pay attention. You're supposed to know this, but people are just people. And I think having had a training, you have it in record, you could at least prove, because as record keeping is very important in our job. You can really prove, yeah, I had this training with this person. He is supposed to know this. So if anything would happen, I can at least show them I have done my part.
Yeah, and one thing that I find is really hard when you're doing this kind of training sessions is when you are doing this training session for the 11th time to
Mm.
someone, and you know that they know what they need to do, but how do you ensure that they are, yeah, for example, trade compliance regulations is constantly evolving and changing. How
Mhm.
do you ensure that even though they have this every year and they are a really seasoned engineer, for example,
Mm.
how do you make sure that they really get the new things, the changes?
That's a very good thing. You need, I think I put a note here. You need to have it recurring, of course. You need to have it recurring in some way. So basically, any training, as you say, the relations keep evolving, knowledge keep evolving, processes keep evolving. So once you have had a investigation or a violation or near miss, you improve your processes. So you need to, of course, spread the word that this has been updated. This has been that. And that is, of course, another challenge when you implement process improvements and you want to spread the word that this is done. How do you do that? Is that within your responsibility to perhaps a process could be regarding shipments that has been improved? Who is the process responsible for that, and who is supposed to train the persons doing that part of the job? That is also a challenge. Like we could have another podcast regarding process improvement and who is owning the processes with regards to trade compliance. Because generally, as a trade compliance manager, you are an expert and you're supposed to keep track and support the business to improve the processes. But generally, I'm not working in a process specifically for shipment, or not working specifically in an engineering development process, communication with customers and so on. So you want to support your business, but you're not really the person responsible for implementing an efficient process. You could be that. You could be the one who has the responsibility for that, but that is key. You need to some way implement the requirements into the different processes. And that I see it as a trade compliance manager, you're responsible to support the business to have efficient and good processes. But you might not be the process expert, because that is the person doing or working within that process. And that maybe those are the people who should train the persons in the improvement of the processes and stuff like that. But basically, I think what you're aiming at is to have some kind of recurring training. And that is also challenging, of course. So if you have a functional training for your engineers, you start out with doing that for all your engineers, for instance, and then waiting half a year or another year, you have 20 or hundreds of new engineers coming in who need to have the same training, and you need to keep track of that. And you need to make sure the ones who had the training 2 years ago get the new training, and also the new engineers. So basically, that is also a challenge. But that goes for any training in a company. But as important is to have this training, and you're not really the one doing the processes, but still you're supposed to make sure they are aware of every new process improvement. As always room for improvement for the processes. I don't think there exists a company that has a foolproof trade compliance program with no process improvements possible. I would be amazed.
No, and the regulations and all the changes in the regulations keeps that an impossibility, because I don't think that any company in the world can keep up with all of the trade compliance regulations evolvements in the world.
No, exactly. Yeah, and stuff gets reclassified, declassified, commodity jurisdictions made, changes made, CCAS decisions, stuff like that, changes, and a customer come up, say, by the way, we sent you this product. It was uncontrolled, but it seems is controlled, and we sent it 5 years ago. And basically, you should have a re-export license for the past 5 years, but you didn't. So that has also occurred.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always like to highlight, that you should never really learn something, but you should remember where you found the information, because when regulations change, some paragraph that you read 5 years ago may be pointing in the opposite direction. So do not remember the specific paragraphs, or do not keep them in a printout, or in a physical copy of a regulation book or something like that.
Yeah.
Look for online sources, but remember where you found that information, so that
Exactly.
you are following fresh information.
Exactly. And that goes both for external regulations, but if you're in a company as is ours, where you have a quality system, which tells everyone this is the way to work, this is the way, or the management system which we're audited on, that system should tell you everything of how you're supposed to work. But still, people are lazy. I have many times gone to the shipment department. Yeah, we printed this process for exporting stuff 5 years ago, and we're still following that. Okay, but we have updated the license twice. Basically, that's something. Always make sure audience also know where to find the internal information for your compliance program, and to have that updated. That's key, of course. Yeah, I think I've said all I need to say about training. So we could,
Yes.
yeah, we could skip to the second part, which I think is also very important. It's related, of course, as everything, but to have some kind of system support for trade compliance within your company, at least working within aerospace. Most things are controlled, at least when you're working with the US. Most everything is controlled in that business in any way, in some way. And the complexity working in the EU, as we are, is that you are basically doomed to follow the US regulations because they're extraterritorial, and then you have your own regulations. And to keep track of that, dual regulations, dual licenses, in many cases, it gets complex. And basically, I think there are so many benefits of having system support implemented in either your ERP or in your PLM, so your product management system. It has so many benefits with regards to risk reduction, that you, for instance, has hard stops, so you cannot deliver some control component to a customer with a license, basically. So for tangible transfers, there are so many support tools available. So I think I shouldn't say the company is stupid if they haven't implemented it, but basically there's so many tools now available so that you should implement something to support your at least your tangible transfers, so that there is license control when you ship something out. And of course, easy stuff as sanctions control for customers, and having that. It is so costly if you do a mistake working with a sanctioned entity, for instance. And
Hmm.
but the challenge there is always I always tell when I talk to the salespeople, is make sure we screen or we check the customer as soon as we have a first contact. We make sure we do a sanction party screening on that party, because you shouldn't spend months preparing quotations and stuff like that, and then setting up the new customer in the system, and then realize, oh, by the way, this is a sanctioned party. We spent months preparing and maybe even
No.
sharing information with that entity. I think
No, I
having at
agree.
least sanctions controlling ERP, that's basic and very easy to achieve, but also license control. There are so many tools to help you now. So I think that's good risk reduction. And
Yeah, really good risk reduction.
also the challenges, I have had so much challenges actually in both my companies where I work with trade compliances, that I know that the system support creates so much efficiency if it's working that it's supposed to work, because and it also creates so much security for the company and for the employees working. So they know that we cannot go through this, or they get a signal early, for instance, placing a sales order. Oh, doesn't seem we have a license for this entity. Oh, we apply for the license and we get the license. But if you have that signal when the shipment is about to go, that's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need
Yes.
to. Yeah. But my main challenges with regards to this is to convince the management of the benefits and the risk reduction. I've struggled all the time actually trying to implement something good and efficient. And also, when we have the support of the management to implement something, the risk is also that the ones doing the implementation does not know, they don't understand. So trying to convince them that these are the requirements. Perhaps there's a trade compliance tool available and it doesn't do what your company need. So for instance, you cannot have a system only working one set of regulations. That's not sufficient. You cannot only buy the US or only the EU regulations. You need to have two regulation sets in your system support. And to convince the person setting up that system or that we need these things, and we need to be able to calculate de minimis, for instance. Not all tools can do that. To convince them to implement a sufficiently good tool for your business. And I think that's key to understand what kind of system support does our company need. Perhaps basic sanction control is sufficient, or it could be that you need the full-blown global trade services tool in SAP to maintain compliance, or something else. I think that's key.
Yeah. And
To
I
understand the
think the
demand.
most,
And,
yeah. And you put the finger on what I always say is the most hard thing to convince every company of. It's that balance between compliance risk and the money spent.
Yeah.
Because you got to find a balance between those two, where you feel comfortable that you are putting in enough money to reduce the risk to a comfortable level.
Exactly. And at my previous employer, I saw this risk as so high when it came to intangible transfers. And I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see any system support that I could convince IT that we're supposed to implement. So basically what I did there, the company was very into lean, to Six Sigma lean things, so way of working, not only in production, but engineering, everything was supposed to be lean. And I took a lean certification training. which was available to anyone who was interested in that. As I said, curious, I wanted to date that. I took a lean training, and in that training, I was supposed to have some kind of work, small thesis work in that training, where I could find an improvement in my area. So what I did is I convinced the management of the military that we could implement something to be able to efficiently log our intangible transfers. So basically a system where you enter your program, get your export classification, both the EU and the US, enter your customer, the country you're sending it to, and then automatically you get the license for that program, or the licenses, and also efficiently a record keeping string to maintaining your system. So that is something I developed. I got an exclusive IT resource who helped me program that in a Visual Studio program, and it turned out web-based solution, which I was very proud when that was released and it went live in the company, and people started using it, and I could just show them, yeah, have this program, you get this classification, and you log it like this, so keep it like this. So it was very good, at least to start with. But then it turned out it was extremely hard to maintain, and that was my second thing regarding trade compliance support tools. Because once you have implemented something, you need to maintain it. You need to maintain your licenses. You need to maintain your classifications on all your items and stuff like that. And that's something I did not expect or prepare the tool I created for. The tool I created turned out to be a monster for the trade compliance persons maintaining it. It was very difficult. As soon as we got a new product, I needed to spend hours implementing classifications, connecting it to the item, connecting it to the license, connecting it to the customer. Ooh.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. But it was very fun. I really think that experience showed me that it is possible to create something easy, who is specific for your company needs, but still you need to make sure you have some kind of IT support who can help you improve the tool once it's released. Because as soon as you start using it, you start finding, yeah, this is a way to improve it. By the way, I could use it also for tangible transfers and my destination control statement in an easy way, but I don't know how to do it. Basically, I wish I was an IT programmer. I could have excelled there.
And to address the elephant in the room, where can we buy this software?
You had to go to my previous employer, GKN Aerospace.
All right.
I don't think they
Working
will
with
sell it because it's not. Talk to the person who took my role after me, and she was not that impressed.
okay.
Otherwise,
But I really think that the one that finds a really good tool to manage intangible compliance, that program is going to fly.
yeah, I still have the idea how it worked, so I still could create it again, but I need some kind of IT person helping me, because I think it was 12 different Excel tables connected in some way, relating to each other. It's not rocket science. That's not rocket science, but I'm not an Excel guru or IT guru. I wish I were, because it is not that complex. Of course, it's complex, but it's not rocket science. I think.
There's always an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I have thousands. It's always, well, of course, it's always a risk of having a tool as well, because tool can give you the wrong answer. If you don't give the right input, you can get the wrong answer. So
No, of
basically,
course.
for intangible transfers, you could have, so for instance, working in a program, you could have an item which is, say, intangible item that's classified as something. And within your company, you could have several licenses which are allowed to send that specific classification, say USML F. You have a license which is, or G is the intangible. So say USML 19G, you have that technology, and you have several TAs, technology assistance agreements, which allows you to send that. And the key is to find out which TA is the one. So you need to have the connection to the program, to the scope. There could be several TAs for a single program as well. So you need to make sure which is the correct one. And that is really a challenge. But that goes both for intangibles and tangibles, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, it really do. So what would you say is the most complex thing about implementing system support?
My experience is I wish I have been able to start implementing something, but my struggle so far has been actually to convince the management that we need this tool and to convince them to spend the money to get that tool and to tailor the tool to the company need. And still, I wish I had the experience to implement something fully and get it to work and get it go live. I unfortunately not had that experience yet. I came very close at my previous employer, but I shifted roles before it went live. But my personal struggle has been to convince the management to implement it or to find the money to make sure you implement it in the correct way. Because if you don't have any system support, it doesn't cost anything. And as long as you don't have any violation, it doesn't cost anything. But basically, I think to convince a manager who doesn't really understand trade compliance that we need this, because the top management can say, yeah, trade compliance is really important. And then the sales team, they also agree, yeah, this is really important, but they don't have anything supporting them. And they perhaps might not understand the importance that the top manager does. The top manager can understand because he's on the line if something goes wrong. But the sales
Yeah, of course.
team might not understand. They, of course, want everything to be correct. Basically, that's my experience. In Sweden, everyone wants to do good work and wants to act compliant. But if there's thing telling them or forcing them to do something, it doesn't show if something is made incorrectly. And yeah, I always tell when I report to the top management that I don't want a big violation being the reason for us forcing us to implement the system support. I want it to come out anyway. I want us to invest in this tool without having a big disclosure or big violation or fine for that.
No, you want to be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly. So
because otherwise you may end up in a consent agreement and then you need to, well, it's not good. You don't want to go there.
No, some actually, I've many times been thinking just evil. I wish we ended up in a consent agreement. So I got this tool that I so wants to work with.
And all of a sudden you have a dedicated budget for your trade compliance.
No, but basically, I think, of course, you always need to have. So the first thing I think anyone starting with compliance is to start to do a risk assessment of your company. If you have a low risk working with low controlled items, you don't want to go into spending money on a big compliance tool. But if you're working in the military industry or space or aerospace, I think you really need to go there. And there have been so much installations in this field of trade compliance tool in the last years. I think there are many to choose from. And I think basically choose one. Go ahead and implement something instead of not having anything.
Yeah, because you can be dealing with products that doesn't fall under any specific regulations, but due to all the sanctions, you may need to have trade compliance in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Just because of that, because the sanctions now apply to many different products that sanctions didn't apply to before.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a different part. But the recent sanction developments for Russia and Ukraine and Belarus has been suddenly something has, you're used to working with the export control classification numbers, and suddenly you need to look into HCS, so customs codes, to really make sure you're compliant there. But basically, find your risk. You do a detailed risk assessment, what needs to be tended to. Also, I think you asked about challenges for implementing system support. One of the main challenges is to do a good and thorough requirement specification for that tool based on the company
Yes.
need. Because you could say, yeah, we need to have license control and we need to have this and that. But if you're not specific on what you actually need, the IT guy or the project manager procuring the tool could end up procuring something which is over the top or not sufficient for your business. And you should try to be engaged in doing a good requirement specification for your system support tool to make sure it's sufficient and enough, but not too much.
Yeah, because otherwise you may miss the target.
Exactly. Yeah, we touched on intangible transfers and the challenge to implement system support there, because I think that perhaps is a field where, at least to my knowledge, there's not too much trade compliance tools available. As you said, one who invents a safe tool for intangible transfers or intangible exports, he gets the Nobel Prize. But I think that is perhaps room for improvement. But the best way, as I started out, for intangible transfers is awareness, to make sure employees doesn't just go about sending control stuff out with an email or with other stuff. To have them aware that is something called trade compliance, and you need to make sure you have a license to share it with any external who that needs to have it. That because once you have that knowledge with employees, they come asking, "Is it okay? I'm supposed my project manager says I'm supposed to send this to this and this person, or the other way. I got this file from my sister company. It states ITO control. What should I do?" And then I get a signal, okay, it's no worries, there's a license, or, oh, that's not good. So basically, if you have, at least if you have awareness, you have the first step. There's also a thin line, because you want to, once you create the awareness, you also create a worry of the employees of doing wrong. You want to help them doing the right things.
Yeah.
As I thought out, as I think is my feel as my mission, try to get them easy enough tool, or explain them, or getting easy processes to follow to make sure they understand them. And of course, contact me if they have any questions. That stays everything.
Yes.
And all trainings with, if you're, I once had a training and he said, if in doubt, ship it out. But basically the other way around. If in doubt, don't ship out. Go ask someone who knows instead.
Yeah, because you always want to, of course, training is good and key for many companies to have that awareness that something that you want to send to another person through an email or something like that may be export controlled. So you need to have that awareness that they need to think before they do. Also, as you said, if one would invent that software that takes away the risk of human error when doing intangibles, that would really be a really good tool. And I think that every company would buy that one.
Yeah. Of course, the tool I created, it was a log tool. It was created to create the correct logs or record keeping of an intangible transfer. Of course, there's always the easy way to go around it. You could just not use it. Just send an ordinary email. That's it. So basically, I think that kind of, what is it called? It's called something like data loss prevention tool. Basically, you have some kind of wet carpet over all your technology in the company, for instance, and have some kind of tough block that you cannot send anything. But as I said, I haven't seen anything efficient enough that there's no way around it, basically. But I think any good engineer finds a way around.
Yeah, they can always hand carry something.
Exactly. Or send it to your phone or something. Yeah. Basically, awareness is best, and to have them know know that it's not okay to do like this, and this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yes, awareness is key, and therefore the training is so important.
Yeah. So I think
Uh,
actually I touched on everything, I suppose, but basically, as we touched on intangibles, it's so easy for a company to do a violation. Say a company with thousands of engineers, it only requires one who doesn't know the correct process or the correct way to do a shipment or intangible transfer by sending an email. So it's also connecting with your IT is key to make sure they implement ways so that you cannot either send technical data by a non-secure tool. You also cannot receive technical data
just
device.
as important.
Yes, and in many ways, as companies are going cloud, which is a very challenge, you go into cloud with your office systems, with your emails, and as cloud is incompatible with military standards and military requirements for most parts. Of course, there's high security cloud in the US, which non-US companies can't use. But so we have said in our company to not use, never to allowed to send any technical data in your emails. You're not allowed to have that because it's on cloud. And I know that it's not easy to have that, but it only requires one customer to send an email with a control file, and everything is end up with a violation. So basically, you need to have something with it stop with files going in as well.
Yeah, I always say that working with export controlled intangibles is like trying to catch a gas with a net.
Yeah, use your net and try to catch it.
You will have your leaks.
Exactly. Yeah, I think. Yeah, as I said, I think we touched on most things. I wrote some other points, but that's not in our agenda for the meeting. But working, as I
Mhm.
said, in the aerospace industry in Europe is extremely challenging, exciting, and I want to raise a hand for all working within space in Europe because I really like it. Of course, it's interesting products, but also we're dealing with ITAR, we're dealing with EAR, we're dealing with EU dual use most exclusively. It's not military in the European regulations. It's dual use, and that compared with ITAR in the US, it creates a mess in people's heads because they tend to, we can share this dual use technology freely within EU, no problem. But as soon as you have any US content, it's like high super control. You cannot share it with your neighbor. So that is something I really appreciate, that challenge in my job, why I enjoy working
Makes
in space.
makes every day a new challenge.
Exactly.
As you, I'm like Lucky Luke here. I'm running out of bullets, but I have one left.
Yeah.
If people want to get in touch with you, how do they do?
I think the best is through LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Or, of course, if they have my phone number, text me. That's good. But LinkedIn is the best professional channel to reach me. So, Emil Svedung, currently working with the Beyond Gravity, previously RUAG Space in Europe. So, we're a relatively small player in the space industry, but working with many different fields, both with spacecraft and launchers and other related topics as well. Very good company to work with. Long history, but a new name, which makes it also a little bit challenging. Name changes and also a company who wants to change the way not work in country silos, but rather working cross borders, both engineering, procurement, sales, creates a lot of challenges.
Yes, and for a space nerd like me, that sounds really interesting as
Yeah,
well.
come join us.
Of course. So I guess the only thing to do is to wrap this up, and a really big thanks to you, Emil. It's been a really interesting talk, and I think it's really important topics that I think many people will find good value in.
Yeah.
So thank you once again for coming aboard.
Thanks for having me, and appreciate it. And if you have many topics to talk about, as we spoke about earlier, we could find other topics that I promise you. Next time I'll sing the export control song for you as well.
Oh, then we gotta have a sequel.
Yeah.
So thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.